Howdy friends! So, if you haven't heard, Blizzard has recently announced that they'll be releasing Dire Maul early. So at the time of making this video, Dire Maul is going to be available tomorrow. This news is bittersweet, honestly. I'm not even level 60 yet, and I imagine most of the player base isn't either. And while I disagree with this timing, being able to go into Dire Maul is pretty exciting. I mean, there's some of the best dungeons in Classic, and the rewards are going to mean getting into raids a lot easier. Plus, these dungeons mean mages are getting their level 55 food and water. These higher level refreshments mean less time sitting and drinking for everybody. There are also some well-known farming spots inside these dungeons. I don't want to go too in depth about these and save the topic for another time, but simply put, the Dire Maul dungeons have a lot of places that players can solo large packs of NPCs over and over again, and sell or vendor the materials later wholesale for some easy gold. Pretty much all of these spots are doable by Druids, but I'd like to go more in depth on that later. Just know that Dire Maul will mean gold inflation for our servers. But that's not entirely a bad thing, as more gold in the economy means training and repairs become cheaper as they're not affected by inflation at all. But I want to go into some items of interest for any Druids and really most classes, but these are specifically for Druids, and starting off is the Unyielding Maul. Now I love this item. The reason is Unyielding Maul is fantastic for a tank druid because it has 250 armor, 12 stamina, and gives you 8 defense. The main reason it's so good is that 250 armor, when shifting into bear form, becomes a ton more armor, making it one of the best in slots for any tank druid. Now, compare Unyielding Maul to the Warden Staff, which is the best in slot weapon a druid can get for all of Classic, and because of that, it's so expensive to get. But compare it to Unyielding Maul, Warden Staff's only slightly better. I mean, just a marginal amount better than Unyielding Maul. It's basically a Warden Staff minus a tiny bit, but the nice thing about it is it's obtainable by everybody. Warden Staff is a very hard to obtain world drop epic that costs, I mean, on my server I've seen it for up to 700 gold. It's going down slightly, but the nice thing about the Unyielding Maul is because it's so close to the Warden Staff, most people don't actually care to pick up the Warden Staff, and they're satisfied with just taking this, making the value of the Warden Staff go down. So if you're someone that absolutely needs your best in slot, then this helps you out too, because the Warden Staff becomes a little bit cheaper, and this is a fantastic alternative for anyone who doesn't need the absolute best. You're satisfied with just tanking with a really good two-handed weapon. I'm excited to get this. It makes it so much easier for Phase 1. It's worth pointing out though that the Unyielding Maul can be given a counterweight, which increases its swing speed by 3%. This does work for a druid, even though they're not actually swinging the weapon for their attacks. Considering how close this weapon already is to the Warden Staff, I'd say that ability is just enough to push it over the edge to argue that it might be better than the Warden Staff. The Unyielding Maul drops off of one of the last bosses in Dire Maul North, so watch out for that. Next we have the Brightly Glowing Stone. This geniusly named item gives 37 additional healing to spells and effects. Now combine this with Hammer Grace, and these two make for a fantastic combination and easily the best in slot for any Restoration Druid looking to get into raids. You can get this from the last boss in Dire Maul North. Also there's the Eye Stalk Cord. This is another wonderful healing item, gives 15 intellect and increases healing done by spells and effects by up to 35. Also, this is leather, and if you're like me, I do not like to sacrifice armor and wear cloth, because if I ever need to shift into bear form and switch to an emergency tank, I want to make sure I have the leather to do it, and this gives me that. You can get this from Dire Maul West from Immortal Thar, the weird dog guy with multiple eyes. Just look out for him. Next, we've got the Insightful Hood. More leather, more healing. This is fantastic drop that gives bonus to crit for spells and increases your healing done by 33%. You get your 15 intellect, 12 stamina, and 9 spirit. Just overall fantastic hood. Pre-raid best in slot for a druid. And it's not cloth, so you don't have to sacrifice that armor. This drops from Chorush the Observer in Dire Maul North. He's among the last boss. He's one of the counselors to the king in there. So watch out for this. You'll notice a trend though. A lot of this comes from Dire Maul North. That is a fantastic dungeon with some really good drops, so expect to be doing it a few times to get this gear. Now if you thought I was just going to talk about healing gear, you're in luck, because the Tarnished Elven Ring is fantastic for any melee DPS class. 15 agility and increases your chance to hit by 1%. So it's not even bad for a tank, because that hit rating and the agility is pretty valuable, but definitely fantastic for a feral druid. If you're just doing feral druid DPS or you're power shifting, this is a wonderful item because that hit chance is huge. Just expect there to be a lot of competition for this. This ring drops from Mizzle the Crafty from, you guessed it, Dire Maul North. But it also drops from what's called a tribute run. That's a little bit different than a regular run of the dungeon. There's a lot of information out there if you want to look that up. I'd like to do a video later on it. Just remember that Dire Maul North Regular and Dire Maul North Tribute Run are two separate ways of doing the same dungeon. Speaking of tribute runs in Dire Maul North, this is the Rod of the Ogre Magi. This is a fantastic, very versatile staff that gives increased critical strike chance for spells, increases damage and healing done by magical spells and effects. That's why I say it's good for damage and casters, and gives plenty of intellect, stamina, and spirit. Really good for a balanced druid, but where I think this really shines is a Moonglow druid. So you can kind of switch to both, do a little bit of damage, do a little bit of healing. The staff lets you do both. I'm going to take this no matter what spec I am, as long as it's like just a greed roll, because this is a fantastic staff. If you want to just switch and maybe you're farming materials and you want to do a hurricane build and focus on burning down as many mobs as you can, items like this are great because they can do both. Now every class gets a trinket from Dire Maul North. The Druids gives increased healing done by spells and effects by up to 44. Now you're seeing a trend for a lot of amazing healing abilities. As someone who's playing a Restoration Druid, I'm so pumped for this dungeon because, I mean, the amount of healing I'm getting out of this is fantastic. But this trinket, in order to obtain this, you have to collect a book. You can buy it from the auction house. Every class can buy theirs from the auction house. Turn it into an NPC within Dire Maul. Not that hard to do, it's just hard to get the book. They're going to be very expensive at first, but it's worth doing because I would say this is one of the best in slot healing items available to druids. So pick this up if you can when you're doing healing. Not that hard to obtain, and that extra 44 healing, can't pass that up. Next is the Mindtap Talisman. Now this is kind of prime real estate for Restoration Shamans because they really need that mana per 5 since they can't regenerate while casting. But it's still fantastic for a druid. Also, you can stack 2 of these because they're not unique. So you'll see a lot of shamans carrying 2 of these. If you find yourself needing more mana regen or you're not quite as efficient as you want to be, pick these up. They're totally worth it for a druid. You're just going to be competing with shamans. These drop from Dire Maul West from the Magister. Last but not least is the Vigilance Charm. This is a tanking trinket that increases your chance to dodge by 2%. Now it's not my most preferred trinket because I'd much rather run something that gives armor, but this is pretty good if you're trying to stack that dodge chance. Maybe you play a Night Elf or something and just already have a lot, trying to build more. It's still valuable as a trinket. It drops from Dire Maul West from Immortal Thar, the multi-headed dog I mentioned before. Now that's everything that drops from Dire Maul, but don't think I forgot the pattern for the Hide of the Wild. This is a recipe that drops for leatherworkers to make the back Hide of the Wild. This is one of the best in slot healing backs for pretty much all of Classic. It gives bonus healing by up to 42, so that's a lot of extra healing from just this one piece. Every healer is going to have their eye on it, but because it's crafted by leatherworkers, it's really, really hard to get the materials. You're going to have to farm a lot in order to get them, but it's worth it. I'm going to be shooting for it. Also, it sounds so Druid, Hide of the Wild. I think it's a really fantastic sounding piece of gear. It looks really good on Druids, but be ready to work for it. Well, that concludes all the drops that are of interest to Druids. If I forgot something, let me know about it in the comments. I mean, there's so much gear that comes from these dungeons, so it's possible I could have skipped something. If so, just let me know. Also, if you enjoy my content and want to support what I do, or just love thrilling tales of adventure, I have my very own novel available on Amazon right now. Link is in the description below. You won't regret checking it out. Anyway, hope you guys found this video useful. Look forward to seeing some of y'all in Dire Maul. I'm playing on Herod. I'm under the name Cabe, C-A-B-E, so if you need a tank or healer on Horde, just let me know. You'll be able to find me there. Appreciate your time, and I'll see you guys next time.